सर आप सुनिए सर, गोपालन सर, you can start now.
Namaste, everybody. This is an unplanned talk. It happened that Dr. Rajaram Kudli was supposed to talk today, and he has expressed his inability. So, at short notice, I couldn't say no to Sushil ji, so I'm in. I thought we could take up one thread which came up in last week's talk. And that thread was, I had again and again raised this issue of thought and the thinker. And this question was raised, is there a thinking? Can thinking happen without the thought and thinker being considered? So I thought we could explore that today. And so I started with this circle, a circle without a center. A circle is a round plane figure whose boundary, the circumference, consists of points which are equidistant from a fixed point, which is the center. So essentially, a circle creates a boundary in unlimited space. And it has three components. It has a center, it has a circumference, and it has a radius that connects the center to the circumference. If you remove any one of these three, the circle breaks down. All these three have to be existing simultaneously for the circle to be in existence. And I'm only using that as a starting point to ask, are thinking, thought, and thinker similar? They create a boundary in the totality of the known. What is within thought is the known, and what is beyond thought is to be known. So the first question that comes is there a difference between thinking and thought as used by Krishnamurti? So this question has been put to Krishnamurti many times, and I will just read a short answer that he gave in a question answer session in July 1966 at Sanem. Quote, questioner, what is the difference between the process of thinking and thought? And Krishnamurti's answer, surely there is not much difference. Do not divide everything into such divisions. The process of thinking is that I ask you a question with which you are familiar, and if you are very familiar with the answer, your response is immediate. If you are not familiar with it, there is a time interval, a lag between the question and the answer. Memory is in operation. You are asking, looking, waiting. The whole of that process produces a thought, an answer. When you come to the point where you say that you really do not know how to stop thinking, you are not waiting for someone to tell you. You really do not know. Then you have stopped thinking, haven't you? When you say, I really do not know the answer to this question, for the first time I listened to it, out of that innocency of not knowing, thought, which is not innocent, comes to an end, unquote. So it seems that thinking is the process of seeking an answer. And when the answer is produced as a conclusion, as a thought, that is the result of this process of thinking. So the essence of thinking is the search for an answer. Can there be a thinking without such a search? Every search must have a motive. And what is this motive? From where does it arise? A motive is a reason for doing something. The reason becomes the goal, either to be acquired or to be avoided. So it's necessary then to examine this process of thinking and thought to really understand what brings about motive. The process of thinking begins just after perception. Perception through sense inputs happens in the brain. In that moment of perception, as we said last week, the thinker is thought, thinking. All three are not active. The moment thought, thinking arises, with it simultaneously seem to arise thought and the thinker. They are not a linear process. So, why does this thinking arise from the perception? Is it not the motive which makes it arise? If a motive does not exist, would thinking arise at all? So when perception happens, thinking attempts to categorize, admit, recognize by comparison to memory of similar experiences. Simultaneously, thinking is also comparing, evaluating, and judging in comparison to this goal. And that judging comes as like, dislike, want more, or would like to avoid, and so on. So, does it not seem that the instant thinking rises from perception, the goal dictated by the motive also rises with it? And the evaluation is always in reference to this goal, which is a projection of thought itself. The conclusion of this process of thinking results in a thought, and that thought includes the evaluation and the judgment. There is no thought without that evaluation and judgment. So, what is evaluation and judgment? Isn't all evaluation and judgment essentially an emotion? The stronger the emotion, the stronger is the thought. If the emotional content is minimal, we may not even remember the incident. So, emotional content of a thought is what makes us recall that thought. And therefore, is any thought free of evaluation, judgment, and emotional content? It doesn't seem so. Even the so-called objective thinking that we talk about is a deliberate attempt by thought to say, let me put aside my bias, let me put aside what I know, and let me listen as if afresh. Is such a thing possible by thought? So, evaluation and judgment is the essence of all memory. And all thinking is based on memory. So, must not every thought inevitably be colored by previous memories? So, objective thought is only an idea, it seems, that has been invented by thought itself. Now, the question that arises here is, are previous memories colored only by one's own experiences and motive, or does the external environment also color them? So, what is this external environment? If we take the simile of a fish in a pond of water, is the water external to the fish, or the water permeates the fish and therefore it is internal and external? If you were to put something into the water and it dissolves in the water, would it not affect the fish? So, can we consider the environment that we live in in a similar manner. There is, of course, the physical environment, the climate, the soil, the food, the pollution, the disease, the crowd, all that is the environment we live in. Is this only external to us, or must it color our own memory and therefore our thought? Then there is the environment of social relationships. And this relationship is not only between humans, but it's humans with animals, with insects, with inanimate objects. So, can our thoughts and memories not be affected by the quality of the relationship that is happening actually? A third element of the external, which is the collective, is the collective emotion, the collective insecurity, the collective fear. Does that affect our own thought and condition its thinking? And we only have to look at the pandemic to see how collective fear can bring fear in us and how we respond to it too. The myth of the mask. See, right from the time this virus started, the message about the mask was very, very emphatically given in all media. The mask is meant to prevent virus which is inside me from spreading outward, or at least minimize it. But deep down in when I wear the mask, my attitude always is, the mindset is that this mask is preventing viruses from outside from coming in. And therefore, we look for multi-layered masks, we look for N95, N96, and different variations, all of which are meant to prevent masks from the viruses and foreign bodies from coming in. And if you see the attitude of a person who has become positive, he's not very careful with his mask after that, because he has got it anyway. He's only worried about not getting it again from outside. So that collective fear and insecurity outside, doesn't it affect us even if we are watchful about it? Then physics tells us that we live in a field of forces. They talk of the four major forces. There is the gravitation force, there's the electromagnetic force, then there is the radioactivity, there's the atomic energy. Now, we live inside these forces. So when these forces change, must they not result in changes in us and therefore changes in our thinking? And we know that gravitation force changes when some large body comes near us. And today astronomy tells us that our solar system is also orbiting around some other system, sun. And in that process of orbit, there are times when it comes closer to large bodies. There are times when it moves away from large bodies. And this affects our gravitation field. And this is what is referred to as now as dark energy and dark matter. So it has an impact on us. We know that sunspots affect our radio communication because they're affecting the electromagnetic field that surrounds us. And add to that, now we are adding our own change to this, even though it may be small compared to the total. With a mobile technology and 5G coming in and microwaves and X-rays and whatnot, man is adding to it, although it may be a very small thing in compared to the totality of what the universe already has. So then this question comes, where are memories stored? And especially when we say collective consciousness, these collective memories have to be stored somewhere. They must exist somewhere. That existence must be in the field of forces. So if there are changes and fluctuations in the field of forces, must not inevitably these memories get affected, and therefore must not the collective consciousness also be affected by fluctuations in the force? Now, in spite of all this, the human being is perpetually seeking to isolate himself from the environment. If you go into the rural areas or up in the hills, you don't find a concept of a compound wall. Even farmers who have fields, the marker is only a particular tree or a particular stone to say that my land ends in here and your land begins. It's only that. Compound wall is something that comes typically to the urban dweller. So that's the first separation from my property from the rest of the world. And today we see that compound wall extending into what are called gated communities. And we have these gated communities where we have the security, and when the virus comes in, we say no outsiders to enter. So we are perpetually seeking to isolate ourselves. So will there come a time when we would like to have our own closed oxygen circulation system and our own closed sunlight system so that it doesn't come from the rest of the world? Because that's the way thought intellect works. But the bigger question here is, this external environment is so big. Obviously, we are insignificant in front of it. We can't change it. But is there something that is far bigger than this external environment? And it seems there is. Does the environment, external environment, exist separate from me? Am I not even greater than that external environment? Now, few hundred years ago, Descartes made this statement, I think, therefore I am. And that was the start of this rationalist science going in a particular direction. But if you really look at it, should we not rephrase it to say, I am, therefore I think? And who is this I am here? It's not that individual little ego. It's the life energy from which we are never, even for an instant, separated. Our breathing may pause in between, our heartbeat may pause in between, but not for an instant is that life energy away from us. Nothing could be closer than that. Why can't we simply remain in that life energy? Is that not being? What makes us want to become something? Is that not again thought, thinking, and the thinker? So, like the circumference, center, and radius of a circle can't exist independently, does not the external environment arise only when I, the me, has arisen? Can this entire external environment, world, nature, exist without the I? Even if it does so exist, can we ever know it? Can we ever cognize it? Can I ever cognize it? Now, we also know that all memories are conditioned. And therefore, that second last part of that talk, which I quoted earlier, when you say, I really do not know the answer to this question for the first time, I listen to it. Then out of that innocency of not knowing thought, which is not innocent, comes to an end. Now, can we take this literally from Krishnamurti and say, I should have to say, I do not know, and thinking will end? Is it possible to go in that direction? Can thought ever say, I do not know, without the rest of that sentence, I want to know? Whether that I want to know is expressed aloud or it's silent, it's there. That is search, is it not? So can thought say, I do not know without the search? Or is this an idea we have made after listening to Krishnamurti saying this? So is it that this whole thing can only be approached through the path of negation? I can only be aware that I'm searching for something. I can only be aware of what is my motive. In being aware of my motive, perhaps there will be a silence which I have not sought. Isn't that really what everyone is searching for? An experience of that kind. So if you remove either the center, the circumference, or the radius, the circle disappears. If you remove thinking, thought, or the thinker, all three disappear. Is this not the experience in daily living? When we are completely involved in whatever we are doing, in that instant, thinking is absent. And therefore, thought and the thinker are also absent. Is it not? This is what I wanted to raise today. Thank you very much.
Anybody who wanted to ask a question or comment? Harshad Parikh has already raised hand. Please unmute and say sir.
Okay.
Harshad sir, please unmute.
Yeah. Are you able to hear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. I like to tell you something about my experience. When first time I read Krishnamurti book, that was The Flight of the Eagle, and it was in 1972. And I read in that book that thought or thinking creates the thinker. And then thinker tries to change thought. And then there is a duality between thinking and thinker, or thought and thinker, and all our psychological problems arise because of this duality. So when I read that thought creates the thinker, it was something very new to me, and how can I verify it? So when you want to verify how this thinker arises, then one has to see how thought arises or thinking arises. And when I try to really look at the beginning of a thought, there was nothing, no thought, no thinker, as if there was some silence. And I felt that, yes, what Krishnamurti says is true. If there is no thinking or no thought, then there is no sense of I. And then there is some kind of silence in which the senses are working. So when I experienced that, then I said, yes, Krishnaji is right, that what we call this thinker or I or me or the self or ego, it is coming from thinking. And if there is no thinking, then the mind is really silent. And this thinking arises because of memory and all that. So in my view, even this thinking arises without any motive also. Like you asked the question whether can thinking arise without any motive. And I feel, yes, most of my thinking is coming like I'm sitting in my room and suddenly some thought arises in my mind, and it may be a very old song which I have not thought about it, which I have not heard in the last few years. And so suddenly from somewhere, a thought comes, and it comes in randomly. And it is not that I wanted to think about it. So, and another strange thing which happened to one Pandit, Gopi Krishna, he has described in his book that after this awakening happened in his body, and of course it created a lot of disturbance, but after 12 years, that process of awakening was stabilized, and then he became very creative, and many poems started coming to him without his trying to do anything. And initially, these poems were coming in the languages which he knew, like Hindi or Urdu or English. But then later on, the poems came to him in languages which he had not learned, like even German language and Persian language. So from where did he get these poems, which he had not, it was not his, he had not read about it. So it seems to me that memory is stored all around us, and maybe within us everywhere. And some sensitive people are able to catch. And sometimes people even remember their past lives memories also, which is not happened in the present life. And there are books written and has been verified by many people. So it is a mystery. But what I wanted to say is that I agree with Krishna ji that this sense of I or me or thinker, it comes from thinking. And without that, there is no thinker. Okay, I finish. Thank you.
Anybody wants to ask a question or comment on it? Or Gopalan sir wants to say
Dinesh
stories
Wagmare,
or stories?
Dinesh Wagmare, please unmute and say. Dinesh Wagmare.
Are you able to listen to me?
Yeah.
Yes.
What I want to say, we have talked right now about circle is having center, radius or diameter and circumference. But when I'm basically an engineer, whenever we talk of a circle, first of all, we have to understand that there has to be some background. If there is no background, neither with the circle has no meaning. So in our case also we see that a circle, if I have to draw with a pencil or pen, I have to take paper first. If paper is there, then on that I can draw a circle with the help of center, radius and circumference, which is created out of it. So this background is very important. In our case also, if we see thinking, thought, no thought, senses, life force, energy, all the things are existing simultaneously. Now it is a question of mind on which it focuses. So all the things are all the time there. We cannot exclude anything. We say if thinker is not there, then thought will be there. Or if thought is there, then if thought and thinkers are not there, then nothing will be there. Or one will be free. If at all thought and thinkers are not there, then also they will remain in background. They will simply go in background and they will operate as and when required. So all the things are simultaneously existing all the time. So we cannot separate the things. Yes, as far as if we are disturbed, see, ego is disturbed, then ego can, the mind can focus on one thing and say, I will not, I will see without thought or without any thinker. That is possible, as JK suggests. But otherwise, all the things are simultaneously existing. So this also we have to consider. Similarly, what is, we are talking of circle, boundary. So as Gopalan sir has also suggested, is there real boundary or there is no boundary or all the things are simultaneously there? So what my views are, all the things are simultaneously available, even senses. Basically our boundary is decided by our senses. So our senses are telling us that you are having a body and you are limited in body, and you are having this this thought of I am or I exist. Even I exist, I get from some reference, and that reference is basically my senses. My senses are telling me that I exist. So we have to see in a broader way, and we cannot exclude anything or simply include 2 or 3 things and say that this may be there or that may be there. So these are my views. What Gopalan sir has to say on this?
You said that you can't draw a circle without a background. That is what I was trying to get at. What is that background from which thinking, thought, thinker, everything arises? It doesn't arise when I'm not alive. So life seems to be that background. But just because life is there, does thinking necessarily have to rise? No, we all have the experience of that moment, that instant of perception when thinking was not active. Whether it is in the background, whether it is subdued, is a different question, but it was not active. It was not operating. It was not interpreting. So there is this quality of perception that happens because life is there. We seem unable to stay with that. There is a restlessness in us which says that I need to say I'm alive. Next, I need to say I'm growing. Next, need to say I'm moving. And this compulsion makes us come out of that perception. Isn't this our problem? This whole restlessness of the mind. When we say mind is a monkey, why is the mind restless? There's a deep insecurity, but that insecurity is at the level of thinking, thought, and memory only, is it not?
Here my question is that background itself is having is vibrant. So that is creating all this thing. It is static also and dynamic also at the same time. So that is creating this which is called as disturbance, or this is what labels we are giving. Otherwise there is a total order if
Right.
our label is not there.
Right. So life is vibrant. Life is perpetually in motion. But our thinking would like us to be static because we feel security in being static.
Yes.
Now, this must cause collision all the time. You can't rectify, change life. You can't make life static. So the only thing I need to ask is, why do I want to become static? What is that illusory sense of security I'm getting in being static? And why do I feel insecure? Or what is it that is making me insecure when there is this continuous, vibrant change all the time?
Whatever you are saying, if it is so, then why people are giving so much importance to silence?
The silence that we talk about is not silence. That is another idea that we are talking about, right? Right? So this is where it all comes down to watching in oneself. That is why I feel only the negative approach is possible. Why is it that I am restless? What is making me move away from the silence? Want to become something? I can only watch that. Can I positively assert anything about the other dimensions? I can only give an idea about it. It's an opinion about it.
Why do I make issue of this disturbance?
Isn't it because it causes a disturbance and I don't want to be disturbed?
So ego all the time wants to interfere. That is the problem.
This is what I'm trying to stress. What you said is ego always interferes. But I'm asking, when thinking itself is connected to ego, can there be thinking without ego? So when we say ego is interfering, thinking is interfering. This is what I meant when I said all three come together. When one rises, all three are there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Shankar.
May I say something?
Yes, sir. Harsha, sir. Continue.
Yeah. It seems to me that the thinking creates the ego. If there is no thinking, then there is something else which we can call awareness or intelligence. And in that, the senses can function properly without thinking. But when thinking arises, out of that, the thinker or ego or self arises. And why we are not able to live in silence or this silent awareness, it is because I think we are attached to the known, what we are familiar with, and silence is something which is frightening for most people, and we don't want silence. And so this memory becomes active and thinking comes from it, and from that the ego comes. So this is what I feel, that there is something else apart from thinking, thought, and thinker, and that thing, Krishnaji calls it awareness, choiceless awareness or intelligence, something like that. Okay, I finish.
Shankar.
Yeah, thank you. I request the host to mute the people who already completed speaking, like Mr. Harshadji, Mr. Dinesh Wagmare, and others. Coming to my question to Gopalanji. I understand that just because I'm not perceiving things as they are, and I'm perceiving them through name and form, I'm creating an illusory world, and because of that, this thought has been born. This thought cannot be born without a labeling, without if you can see things non-verbally. So we all know that thought has created something called currency out of nothing, and started calling a poor and rich. Like that, thought has created millions of concepts. We all know that we are not beginners in this. So just because we got caught in these concepts, we are seeing a world of a lot of concepts, which is all illusionary. And just because all the millions of people around us are living in those concepts, you have no other option but to continue to live with the same concepts called currency, relationship, religion, nationality. But we know that they are all false, but we continue to live it. It has no effect on the mind, because I know it's not real. But I don't care even if I live in those concepts. So my question to Gopalanji, why we are insisting every time that thought should not be there? You should be without thought. I see it's not required. See, no doubt, you know that why there is thought, because you are seeing things with a label and with form. Suppose you see chair, you can see the wood. You can see the wood, or you can see the chair. If you are seeing the chair, you are seeing the shape. If you are seeing the wood, you are only seeing the material, not the shape. If I see the Shivalinga, I'm not seeing the stone. If I see the stone, even in Shivalinga, I only see the stone and I can sit on the Shivalinga. I don't mind. If I see the Shivalinga, that form, then only I'm afraid to sit on Shivalinga, because that concept stops me. So even if the thought comes, once I know the faults in that thought, because of the conditioning it is coming, because of my inattention it is coming, that thought, so let it come. So please help me, sir. I got stuck here. Thank you.
Gopalan sir.
We are not helping. We are only putting out our understanding. I think we should be clear about that. What you said, why we are, first of all, we are not saying thought should not arise. We are definitely not saying that. In fact, I am saying the other thing. I'm saying thought is the opportunity which we humans have. In watching that motive, I understand how even something like a chair brings in an association, and deep down there's an attachment. I would like to have a beautiful chair. I would like to have that. It may be very, very deep, but it is there. But that's the opportunity. Now, when you began, you said, we keep seeing this happening, and then we don't care. I don't think it remains like that. I think we get affected. Our hold on these things becomes a little looser. We don't hold on to such things very easily, because even as we say, I would like to have the chair, there is also an understanding that, look, again, I'm desiring another piece of food. What is making me desire? At least the questioning begins. And thought initiates this questioning. And therefore, thought is a tremendous tool that we must have if we use it in the direction of questioning. But if we use thought to justify what is happening and say, well, the whole world is like this, I alone am not going to change it, what's the point? That becomes the wrong question. So the posing of the question, a critical question, which will lead to another question, begins with thought. And I think that's a tremendous tool that we have. And that is why we need to have this continuous questioning and not ending with an answer. Answer closes questions. So we need to have the question. Why do we need an answer? Why do we need the finality of an answer? Who is seeking to have that finality? And why do we want the finality?
Clemis.
Yeah. So my question is, Gopalan said in the beginning, some time back, that about the background. What is the background from which thought arises? That was, you talked about that. So while listening to that, something occurred to me. So the background from where thought arises, would it not be inattention? Because most of the time when we are attentive, it does not arise. For instance, I will give a personal example if you don't mind. When I was very small once, my mother told me, because I had no ability with making crochet and all this business, and she was quite upset with that. She told me, I like your sister better because she knows all those things and you have no interest in that. I remember when she told me that, I was so attentive to her. It didn't hurt me. In fact, after I thought to myself, she's right. And every time I saw her with my sister doing crochet and all these things, I felt very happy. It did not hurt me in the sense that I felt, oh, she likes her better than me or anything. No thought arose at that moment. But I remember I was fully attentive to her. So my feeling is that this inattention is what creates all this thinking process and all this back and forthing.
Yes, absolutely. See, Dr. Parikh said awareness. I said perception. I also said life. Then there is intelligence, there is understanding, there is attention. All these are qualities of life energy, are they not? Because they are only there when we are alive. What comes in the way is the inattention. And inattention, again, doesn't it come because there is a motive either to get more or to avoid? So this is what I was trying to say last time also. Is motive the reason why thought arises? But I can't decide that I will not have a motive. I can only be aware that this motive is coming up. I want an assurance that at the end of the day, I will get a meal. I want an assurance. So, and in seeking this assurance, this security as we call it, all thinking arises. But actually, that thinking is not going to give the security. The security is going to come from somewhere else. But I think that if I'm thinking about it, I'm doing something about it. And this is a very deep conditioning that we have. When we think we are thinking about something, we think we are doing something about it. We may not be.
But don't you think that the motive itself is a product of thinking?
Yes, exactly. The motive, exactly. So I can only be aware of that motive, that there is a motive which says, deep down, I want an assurance. Deep down, there is a fear, insecurity. Primary motive becomes insecurity. Also, deep down, I know that I, myself, my identity has no foundation. So I need you to keep telling me that I'm alive. I need this all the time. But that's what I was trying to ask. Is motive the originator of all thought? If I didn't, this is purely hypothetical. If I didn't have a motive at all, would a thought arise at all?
Yeah, I feel if there is a motive, it is created by thought. So it is not from where thought arises. It continues. This is one kind of how can I say, a contributor for more thought, but it is already arising from thought. So the background from where this motive arises, my feeling is it can be related to this state of inattention, because most of the time we are not deeply attentive to what we are doing, to what we say, to what people tell us. We are not fully, completely, like Krishnamurti used to say, we don't listen with our whole being. We are not present. So when that presence is there, means we are fully there. There is this full attention. No thought will arise in any form, in the form of the desire for more, wish for this, or motive for anything. So that's my feeling.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
So in our language, we can talk about that state of attention. But is there a separate state of inattention? Or in that state of attention, the moment thought has arisen, that is inattention.
Yes, it arises because of lack of that full attention. The moment of inattention, it arises.
Right. Now, can thought arise unless there is a memory? Can thinking happen without any memory?
I don't think so.
Therefore,
can I say something here?
Yeah, just let me finish this one sentence. So this is what I was trying to say, that for thinking to arise, it must have a connect to memory. And the root of that motive is in the memory. But without the memory, there can be no thinking. So any thought which arises from such a memory must be conditioned. Yeah, please go ahead.
What I want to say, that in my views, this motive can be different for different people. So one has to also see what are the traits available in that individual. Say in the example which Clemis has given, she felt happy about the sister, but somebody would have felt hurt. Somebody would have felt angry. So why this difference is, from where this difference is coming? This difference is coming from the basic traits or parameters of the personality, which are again coming from the unknown. That when a child takes a birth, the child has got all these traits and parameters hidden in his psyche. So these traits are very important. Even the motive, different people can have different motive based on their traits, personality traits. So one has to be very attentive about the traits also. This thought is, what is thought basically? Thought is just, in my view, thought is just a representative of the inner disturbance, energy disturbance, which thought is just giving it a words or verbalizing it, or it just expressing the outer or giving it just the material this thing, expression to it. But the inner disturbance is from inner side. The personality is having traits, and from that it is coming. So one has to, while in self-knowing, one has to understand what are his traits and in which direction they are forcing him to go. So motive has got, I think, in background the traits and the parameters and inclinations of the personality. This is to be given an importance. What Gopalan sir has to say on this?
I think Mr. Ravi wants to say something. So can he finish?
Ravi,
Then we will.
Ravi, please start.
Good morning. There is a noise around. Election is going on. Can you hear me? And or the noise is disturbing?
No, we can hear you.
Yes. Yeah, continue.
Yeah. Motive. I do feel that thinking, thought, ego, and motive that cannot be suppressed. And when you try to suppress it will bounce back. So instead of suppressing, I do agree with Gopalan sir that we should watch it, observe it. But during being aware with the motive, we need awareness, and in attention there is a motive, and during attention there is no motive. I do feel it, but I am not sure. So, but we can't be constantly aware. That is arduous thing. And to be aware, that means bringing the effort, and bringing the effort will bring the self, the ego. So that is a complete loop I'm trapped in. If I want to remove one thing, I have to remove second, the third, the fourth, and fourth is connected to first. So how to do that?
Would anybody like to say? I don't have to monopolize the floor. Would anybody like to respond?
I can say something on this. That is why JK has given emphasis on wisdom. Wisdom means not to make issue of anything. If you are only awareness will not serve the purpose, or only seeing the things will not serve the purpose. One has to have that wisdom and intelligence, and he has to understand the structure of mind, the movement of mind, and he has to understand the movement of thought, each thought or each reaction. And if the intelligence comes into picture, then only I think he can be free. That's what I think. Because otherwise this loop is there, what Ravi is suggesting.
Harshad Parikh sir.
Yeah. Yes, I want to say that thinking can happen in the background of awareness or attention. And when a thinking is happening in that with awareness, the thinking moves straight without creating any problem. But when thinking happens without attention or awareness, then that thinking creates many problems. It creates thinker, ego, then we say, I liked it, I don't like it. All that comes with the birth of the thinker, which comes from thinking. And that happens when there is no awareness or attention. But when there is awareness, thinking can go straight without creating any problem. It's like if you are in an empty room and somebody enters through the door and you know that somebody has come and that person comes and goes away, there is no problem. And then the room is empty again. So similarly, in the background of awareness, thoughts can come and go. They don't create any problem. But only when there is no awareness or no attention, no intelligence, then thinking will multiply. It creates this thinker ego, and then say, I don't like it, I like it. All that happens in the absence of awareness. Okay, I have finished.
If I can, yeah, if I can, Sushilji, if I can just some of the points that have been raised, then we'll, so that we don't have too many points to talk about later. What Dr. Parekh is talking about, I think sometimes we are interchangeably using brain and thinking, right? So for perception to happen, the brain is necessary. Thinking is not necessary. At the same time, if you're going for a walk and you're putting your foot on a snake and you get that feel immediately, you jump. There is no thinking that is happening there. The body, including the brain, has just acted. It has used memory. It has in an instant said, this seems like a snake, but without the conversation, it has made one jump. That is the kind of, when Dr. Parekh is saying thinking without thought, I think he's referring to that kind of action, which I am calling perception, he is calling thinking. So these are differences at the level of words. Dinesh ji talked about traits and personality. What are traits and personality? If you take them down to their very root, are they not ideas built about myself? Do not all traits and personality emanate from that? So they are the core of the judgments that I have formed about myself deep down in memory. And therefore, when my trait or my personality expresses itself, only then is there the opportunity for me to be aware that I have such a trait or this is expressing itself. Otherwise, it is academic. But when I see myself getting irritated, that's the opportunity for me to watch that I'm getting irritated and what's the cause of it. In that moment, that door is open, and it's in that instant only that the door is open. And that is why relationship is the door, because only in relationship is the opportunity to observe like this. Another expression that was said was, attention is very arduous. For whom is it arduous? It's for thought that it is arduous. And I think we have some thing mix up on this effort. We feel that effort comes from will, and therefore it is a negative thing, is how we look at it. But in many of the public talks, Krishnamurti always asks, are you working as hard as I am? If you are, you should be tired, right? So what is this working? You can't work to listen to him. So what is this working? What is this watching? What is this that makes us arduous? And therefore, is it necessary to create a way of a lifestyle where we are not very actively involved in thought-related activities by compulsion? See, work makes us get into that. Education makes us get into that. So for 50, 60 years, we are used to being extremely active intellectually. And that has become the rhythm of this body. And if you don't have that activity, we feel sometimes insecure, we feel bored, all kinds of things happen. So there is, I think, a 1956 talk where Krishnamurti said, take retreat. Why should you take retreat? Take retreat to break this rhythm that we have got. And in that process, watch what happens. So a retreat doesn't have an agenda that I have to finish this, or food is given to you, you're sitting there and you're watching what comes up. You create such spaces. In doing that, is there some loosening of these things that happen? Yeah, so these were the questions I had. Thank you.
Prasoon,
Prasun Jain, and then
Yes.
Pradeep Prakash.
No, I was just thinking about what Ravi just asked, and trying to follow the discussion. So we we discussed around the things that inattention brings in a motive, but attention also, or the awareness also, requires effort. Now, is this effort, why is effort required to be aware? I was just asking myself this question. Just to be aware of my own thought process, what is this effort? Is this effort to being more aware of my thought process and my motives? Is that effort towards awareness? I'm just asking this question. Why is this effort required? And is this effort also indicating that me trying to become aware is also in a certain way another thought process? And that's what I wanted to come to. Like, it almost comes like that: if you are attentive, you will stay away from your motive, or at least you will become aware of it. But if if there is I will say there's no process, but if you're just trying to become more aware, that itself sometimes looks like an instrument of will, that I'm trying to become aware, or I'm willing myself to be aware. So somewhere I kind of feel that there is this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And we seem to have come to a conclusion that if we are if we are paying attention, then we can kind of break this loop. So I was just thinking about
Yeah.
Ravi's question, and I thought maybe it's worth a comment.
Yeah. So this is, you see our language, pay attention, right? This is a very common expression which we have heard from school onwards. Pay attention. Can one pay attention? Or to be very precise, I can only be aware of my inattention arising. I cannot pay attention. Therefore, can I really be more aware? Or I can be aware that my mind is wandering. I can be aware of the movement away from awareness. And this is what I meant when I said, is it that we can only approach this negatively? You keep negating. This is a movement away. This is a movement away. What remains, remains. Why do we have to say that is awareness? But we like to categorize and feel comfortable if we can categorize and say, yes, this is the state of awareness. Because our thought would like this kind of assertion all the time.
Pradeep Prakash.
Yeah, thank you. Every time somebody speaks there is something happens to Pradeep and he wants to say something. So now what is the motive of Pradeep? That every time somebody has said there is something happening to him and he wants to say something. I have heard these words: thinking, thinker, thought, ego, motive, many times right now. And I tell you, what is happening when somebody says something is a dissonance, is a feeling, is a discomfort. Oh, this is the right perspective can be this. This can be a better understanding of what is being said. So there is a dissonance arising in me, in Pradeep. And that dissonance makes him say something. So right now, why Pradeep has raised his hand here and why he wants to say something. What is the motive? The motive is that, look, there's a dissonance, there's a feeling of discomfort. What is that discomfort arising? Because people here are intuitively, unconsciously aware of something, but they're not conscious of it. You'll ask me, what is that? You see, that is, we are not focusing on feelings. Sir, it is the feelings which drive, it's the fuel, it is the motive which makes people do everything. Whether it is when you say, I don't know, you said, Gopalan, I don't know, then can you stay there? most of us cannot stay there because the moment I say I don't know, I'm uncomfortable. And this discomfort makes me want to know. I feel insecure, unhappy, and these feelings make me become the motive, the fuel to want to know. But there is a solution here. What is the solution? There are thousands and thousands and millions of things I don't know. And I am okay. Pradeep is okay not knowing. The moment this comes, there is a contentment, there is a silence. And that silence in some creates a lot of fear because that fear or insecurity is of ego vanishing, dying, death, fear of death. And therefore, nobody wants to be silent. So they want to be doing something. You said there is a satisfaction, I'm doing something. Yes, this is the game mind plays. So the main focus that I want you to put here, I can tell you, even Krishnamurti never consciously, he's talked too much about thinking, thinking, thinking. I think the focus has to be on feeling, feeling, feeling. And that is why most of you are talking, thinking, 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 because although he talked a lot about feeling, so you should understand that since childhood, we feel inadequate. I'm born as a child and I feel inadequate. Everyone around me knows everything. And I don't know how to walk, I don't know how to talk, so I'm inadequate. That sense of inadequacy is deeply ingrained since childhood, and that inadequacy makes us do a lot, drives us to learn, move, and all. So there's an advantage of that inadequacy, but at some time, at point of time, you realize that this inadequacy is never going to end. Whether you earn millions, billions, or you are the most famous person in the world, or whatever, this inadequacy is there, and this is going to drive you, and you are always going to be running on the treadmill, never stopping, never resting, never be at ease. So the liberation when you understand these processes happening within you, that liberates. These are the liberating. Then comes the contentment, then comes the silence, then comes the awareness, then comes the joy, then comes the sahajavastha. So focus on feeling. That's why. So whenever you see your mind, whenever you are hurt, somebody talked of trade. Dinesh Vagbari talked of it. Somebody is hurt, somebody is angry. Okay, this is a process where somebody gets hurt, then they blame others, then they get angry, and somebody blames themselves, and then they get sad. These are the processes. The more aware you become, as Gopalan said, the more you realize the power and how they operate. And once you know their operation, you can stop it. It stops. The very light on them stops them. You get the power to stop. That's liberation. So focus on feelings behind everything. Thank you.
Clemish, please.
Yeah. See, first of all, I agree with Mr. Pradeep when he says about feeling. I also have a feeling that people who start reading Krishnamurti, we have this tendency to start to talk too much about thought, and then that mentation becomes too strong. And but we forget that Krishnamurti also said that without love, all knowledge becomes destructive and leads only to self-destruction. So he talked a lot about love, but I don't see people talking much about that. And he emphasizes the need for this love. But the more we make things rational, the less this love is allowed to flower. That's my feeling, which may be wrong also. But I feel that this point that Krishnamurti touched very, very profoundly many times, and even when he talks about nature, that the profound love that he had for that is so visible. And but somehow we leave all that aside, and he's not the only one with whom we do that. We have done that with almost every teacher. So, but what I wanted to say here was not this. I just took what Pradeep was saying and I added a little bit to that. But what was I going to say? I even forgot it now. I was going to say something that I forgot. In Brazil, where I come from, they say if you forget something, it's because it was a lie. Maybe it was. So just leave it. I don't know what I was going to say. I forgot it. Anyhow.
Gopalan sir, do you like to say something of the comment Ravi has said that insight about observation and observer and circle with no center
Without observer.
without observer?
Yeah, see, we listen to Krishnamurti talking of observer is the observed. But for us, it's a statement, it's an idea. Right? How to actually experience that state of observer is observed. Right? This is what last time also I talked about. Every sense input that we get, and we get millions of them in a day, is perceived first. The talking about it comes afterwards. So isn't that observation? So we are observing a million times a day. Out of those million observations, maybe 100 thoughts arise, but the remaining, it doesn't even register. So no thought arises. The only way it seems is to go the path of negation. Ask, why is it that this observer has risen in this particular case? Can one take every opportunity like that to its core? It's very difficult to find out what is the source of a thought. If one tries actually to do it and say, okay, suddenly this thought has come. What started that? Before you have spent a minute, you realize you're not thinking about something else. Some other thought has hijacked it. That's the mechanism of this whole thought process, to prevent one from watching itself. And that is what requires a lot of effort, and that's why it's arduous. So when we say be constantly attentive, what we are really saying is, can we be constantly attentive to our inattention? What is causing what is it that is we are being inattentive to? Is there a pattern there? Sometimes it helps to write it down so that you see it over a time. Is there a pattern in our inattention? Is there a thread in that inattention? We can only be questioning inattention. We can't be talking about attention. We don't know what is attention. We can't talk about it. When we are not inattentive, we are attentive. So we can only work at inattention.
Can I say something here? Can I say something here?
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, we also have to see one thing, that we are talking a lot of about negating the things. But in practicality, when we see, there are so many insights which come after a lot of thinking. Of course, in that case also, when thought stops, a new idea comes. Say in case of our engineering and field and other fields, also we see all the new creations, they have been made after a lot of this thinking and after brainstorming and all that. Of course, when the thought stops and there is something which comes up and which is which they say that it's an insight. So we have to see this from this angle also. We cannot, we should be open. We cannot say that we can only look at the inattention and then attention will be there. So I think this point also has to be seen. Another thing, we talk about motive. Motive, what Krishnamurti said is when you got in the trap in the becoming, then only he said there is a motive. But here on the other side, he said that if a rose tree is there and it grows and it gives a flower of rose, it's a natural process and it is without motive. So to which he has referred as flowering. So flowering of a person in a natural way, what he has inside, and if it has grown in a natural way, that should be encouraged, and that is a normal process, actually standard process. So what Gopalan sir has to say on this?
See, when Krishnamurti talked of flowering, one of the questions he asked is, why does a flower bloom? It doesn't seem to need a reason to bloom. It blooms. Our minds don't allow such a thing. We need a measure all the time. And I think one of the incentives for us is this whole realm of ideas. And this is, talent can be a curse sometimes. You invent something, then you think you have invented something super and you have done something great and you need to do something more. But actually, we are only reinventing something that already exists in nature. Maybe we haven't connected it up, but it's already there. We are only reinventing. And the sense of achievement, I have been able to do this, I have been able to conquer. At that moment, if we watch what is that sense of achievement, we will see this. I have been able to meet this problem. I have been able to defeat this problem. This is what actually gives us a thrill. And we have been fed this diet from a very young age. It's encouraged. So we never really ask, what is it to be creative and original? Can creativity and originality come through effort? Can you plan for it? Will it come through all these jugglery of thought, or creativity and effort comes from that life energy only, and we keep interfering and plugging it in between? And when Pradeep ji talked about feeling, see, the dividing line between feeling and emotion is very gray. When does a feeling become an emotion? Because emotion is at the level of our thought. There is in commentaries on living, there is this little passage where Krishnamurti stayed in the Himalayas for a while, and he was walking behind a mother and a girl who were carrying a headload of firewood. They were taking this wood from up in the hills. They would go down to the village in the plains, sell it, come back next day for the next headload. And the child was telling the mother that she was hungry. And the mother very matter of factly said, we are born with hunger, we live with hunger, we die with hunger. That's our lot, right? And Krishnamurti, watching behind what he has written about the feeling of it, the feeling of he being that mother and the girl. I mean, if you get this passage in commentaries I'm living, you should read it, right? That feeling has no emotion. When you look at the suffering in the world outside, can you remain without that a feeling rising in you? But if you remain with it, we'll go mad in the structure that we live in. Therefore, we rationalize it. We give an explanation. We don't look at it, right? Because if you looked at that, this first question that comes to you is, how can I hold on to something when somebody else is starving out there? Your lifestyle has to change. That makes it very uncomfortable. Therefore, we bring in our rationality, we bring in our arguments. We avoid remaining with feeling. So to remain with a feeling is one thing, but to watch where it becomes emotion is a different challenge.
May I go
Ravi,
ahead?
Ravi, please.
Yeah. Uh, Whenever I try to observe my thought, I do see that there is an observer, there is a person behind observing those things. So there is a duality. I am not one. And this journey with K, my journey with K started with this question to find out the center of the thought, because I had been having so many thoughts. So pursuing those thoughts, ultimately I decided, felt that I have to find the center of the thought, and once the center of the thought is found out, I'll be something else. So I tried to find it out and found out that there are infinite thoughts coming from one thought behind another, then another, and I couldn't found the center of the thought at all. And while searching on Google, I've came across many vague answer, and then fail upon Krishnapati's Madras talk about those things, and I read it, and suddenly i I dropped it, or it got dropped, I don't know. I didn't pursue to find out the center of the thought, but now I find quite difficult to drop this observer who is observing the thought. Thank you.
Claim is
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Gopal, it is about, he said just now that Krishnamurti also touched that question, why does a flower bloom? And something occurred to me, which is, see, the nature of the flower is to bloom. So we are not allowing our nature, thought, this I, this me, this thinking machine is not allowing our human nature to bloom. So it is blocking that. So because if this was not there, the flower has no thinking. It doesn't think. So the flower just blooms because that's its nature. But in the human case, there is this thinking process going on, which is not allowing the blooming, the flowering of our human nature. So that is why it is so important that this thinking, this thought process finds its right place and does not interfere where it doesn't belong. Somehow it has gone into just everything and it does not belong into many places where it is right now. So that's what I wanted to say.
Yes, but for all its faults, it also offers us the gate, to open the gate, which is to be able to raise the question and then remain with the question, which is to watch how we are so easily drawn away from remaining as a human being, getting into the worlds of ideas. Without that tool, we won't be able to do that. So it's the tool that we have. How we use it is up to us.
Yeah, should I go?
Pradeep Prakash.
Yeah. Gopalan, I want to talk about two things. One, you said that we can be only aware of inattention, and when awareness goes, there's no need to note down. The pattern is very simple, Gopalan. The moment there is intense feeling, you lose awareness, you lose attention, whether it is hurt, loss, pain, vulnerability, happiness, whatever. That is the moment of loss of attention, and the moment the intensity of emotions, the feeling is reduced, you are again back to more awareness. So that's a very simple. The second point I want to talk about is you have responded about feeling and emotion, and you have quoted Krishnamurti walking behind those two women, hunger and all. Let me tell you, there are 20 many feelings will make us uncomfortable all the time, like the guilt. I'm enjoying all the comfort, and this woman is hungry. There's a guilt. And how do I deal with guilt? Do I remain in this guilt forever? I cannot. I can't be uncomfortable. This is a natural process. I'll run away from unhappiness, discomfort, pain, etc. Move toward. So there are more than 25, not only just rationalization, there are more than 25 ways to escape from feelings of discomfort, from pain and loss. Those are called defense mechanisms, technically. And the more aware I become, the more I'm able to live deep. And the real wisdom and or intelligence in my world lies in ability to understand those feelings, confront them, and deal them functionally. So that is why I'm saying the focus has to be brought on feelings, and this is not missing, but this is not focused. Anything you see, look at, you should look at feeling. What is the feeling behind, and you'll find the answer. Thank you.
Yes, but to watch when the feeling becomes emotion, you said we have all these defense mechanisms. Defense against what? Against damage to my identity. It's defense of my identity.
All the pain and discomfort.
Exactly.
All kinds of pains.
So can I, in that process, ask, why do I have this identity at all? Because that seems to be the cause of all the pain. At least to start having that question and then hold the question and let's see how it opens up.
The trigger for reflection. I fully agree. These are the triggers for reflection and liberation. These are the points that will liberate you if you reflect, understand that. Thank you.
Time is over. So may I close it, sir? Gopalan, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much, sir. Please close.
Thanks all for the contribution.
Thanks a lot. Modak, please close.